Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome in for the second episode of Pucks and Prosecco. I'm Meghan Angley, joined by Chloe Theil. We've got an exciting show planned for you today. Some serious and fun topics to get into. How are you doing today, Chloe?
I'm doing good, and we have to let everybody know that you don't see the Prosecco here because before we started the show, we actually each had a mini bottle of Prosecco. We thought it would be more fun that way.
We received the feedback that the Prosecco was cool for the Pucks and Prosecco brand.
Right.
So we took that to heart, had a little bit of Prosecco before the show, and I'm excited to give you some really great content. Off the top of the show, I know we've teased that we're going to be talking about Kim Weiss today, and I'm really excited. We've been sitting on this interview all season. She's the video coach for the Colorado Eagles, and also included in this episode from the head coach of the Colorado Eagles are comments about the value that Kim Weiss has brought to their coaching staff this season. And it struck me as an important topic of discussion because of the ways in which men can be allies to women in a male-dominated space. We talk about women in sports and the barriers that can exist for them sometimes. And one very important part of that discussion is the way in which men can be allies to women. And when they use their platforms to speak about the value that women add to their lives professionally, it means a lot. It goes a long way. It carries a lot of weight. And the first person who came to mind recently from the Super Bowl is Super Bowl champion Jalen Hurts and his comments about having an all-female management team.
Which is just so exciting, especially now that he's won a Super Bowl, to be able to have that recognition, and him talking about his team of women is now, seen by millions and millions of people that watch the Super Bowl every year.
Yes. I think using his platform to come out and speak about why he chose to work with an all-women management team is such a great use of that platform. He said, it's something that happened organically. I was seeking out the best, and that's how it happened. And honestly, it's an eye that I don't have that I'm able to lean on in certain situations. That's something I value heavily. And I think that carries a lot of weight. You look at these women too, I want to say their names on the show. His agent, Nicole Lynn, on the communication side, Chantel Romaine and Shakima Simmons-Winter. On the management side, Jenna Malfris, and on the marketing side, Rachel Everett. So a pretty powerful team of women behind him. I think too, I also can just appreciate that an athlete has a team kind of on the PR side that maybe in the hockey world, you don't normally see like 5 people surrounding an athlete past their agent. There isn't a lot of handling on the PR side. That's kind of done within the team. So it's cool to see the NFL bigger stage, a sport that receives a lot of viewership and recognition. It probably does require a little bit more hands on deck.
Oh, yeah. And when I really look at each one of them, you're talking like daily logistics of what happens with the team every day. You're talking about like his public image and the messaging they have to give off, brand endorsements, and then also learning about how his agent was the one that negotiated his contract, which was, I wrote it down, let me find it. So it's 5-year, $255 million contract, so making him the 9th highest paid quarterback in the NFL right now, which is just, it's just amazing when you look at everything that they deal with on a day-to-day basis to have that team.
I think it's huge, and I love the shout out to the agent too, and the seriousness of contract negotiations, because I think sometimes as a profession, people might undervalue what the marketing and the PR and the social media management side adds to the table.
Yeah.
But it increases earning potential. Like the contract negotiations, that's the yearly salary coming in. But everything additional from ad sponsorship and brand work comes from that social media, communications, PR side of things. And that's more money coming in each year. And
Yeah.
so that increases just the ceiling for what he'll earn in his career and finding great brands that align with his purpose, his values to work with. And that comes with a team that recognizes those values and will be aggressive in pursuit of finding those relationships.
Imagine if Mikko's agent was a woman. Is there a chance that maybe this signing would have gone a little bit differently and he would still be with the Avs versus where he is right now? I don't know.
Doesn't it feel like there was just a miscommunication, whether it be from agent to player in terms of expectation as far as Mikko Rantanen is concerned? Because I think from the front office side, it's pretty cut and dry. Like, all right, here's sort of where we're at. Here's our threshold for what we're comfortable spending. There's this internal cap that's been set. This is what we're comfortable with. And so that's pretty cut and dry. I think there's something that was broken down in communication on the Rantanen side between the agent. Like, yeah, no, that's serious.
Right.
The leverage that we think that we have to negotiate, maybe to talk them into a higher number, that's not real. When they set that cap, that was real. They were firm in that. I think that's what's interesting. Like, if Mikko Rantanen knew just how firm the Avs side of things was, would he have moved differently throughout the negotiation process?
Right. And that's an issue with your agent, and not that the entire thing is his agent's fault, but knowing that and understanding that before you come through and try to make a deal is ultimately what caused the downfall of this.
The breakdown. It stinks too because he's represented other Avs players, to include Mackenzie Blackwood, who recently got his extension done with the Avs easy peasy. And honestly, that came through quicker than I expected. McFarland was pretty clear when they brought in Mackenzie Blackwood that they intended to extend him, which I thought was a great sign of faith that this was going to happen. But they moved on it quickly, and it felt like a number that was palatable. Like, okay, that's more than they've invested in goaltending through this point, but it also feels pretty reasonable, especially with the expectation that the cap is going up. So all of that being reasonable made the Mikko Rantanen negotiations and the breakdown there feel a little bit confusing. Like, where did all of the logic and kind of straightforwardness and ease of that contract get lost here? And I still can't really pinpoint where that breakdown was, because Rantanen was pretty clear after the trade that because they had just talked a week prior, he thought that line of communication was still very much open.
And not to change the entire conversation,
Do it
back to Mikko Rantanen, but back to Jalen Hurts. I do think that it's so necessary to have allyship in sports and hockey specifically, but I think this serves as such a good example of how having male allies can elevate women in professional sports.
I do think it's incredibly important because, again, we can kind of get hung up on maybe the negative side of being a woman working in sports and the barriers that exist. And so recognizing how men can be a part of the solution is so important, because from Jalen Hurts' side of things, he's just speaking authentically from his heart about the value that working with these women has brought him, and how choosing the best, I think, is an important part of it too. Making the distinction that these women were qualified candidates. And so this wasn't just some kind of pandering hire. These women genuinely also bring about a different sort of perspective that might have been lacking, that he really appreciates. And I do think having diversity in perspective in any sport is so valuable. And I think it's also good for young men to see people that they admire talk about women in this way. I think that when I look at cultural issues that plague our world today and the divide that exists sometimes between men and women, I think the path back to each other and working more harmoniously starts with players like Jalen Hurts using their platform in that way.
Yeah. I even think about, working here and having, a male CEO and male bosses and giving us the opportunity to even do this show.
I'm chuckling a little, but it's sort of in the back of my mind when I'm planning for this episode, how I wouldn't be here if not for men opening a door, welcoming me in, and backing and supporting me along the way. Because I entered the scene virtually unknown, and there were people who were familiar with work I had done that believed in it, and they happened to be men.
Mhm.
And I look at some of the feedback that I really value when I'm in the field, and it comes oftentimes from like a head coach, Jared Bednar,
Yeah.
just in how he answers a question in a press conference can be so supportive and affirming because it's respectful and it's thoughtful. And that by itself is affirming. And he's probably not even conscious to it. He's just answering a question that he thought deserved a thoughtful answer.
Yeah. So basically, thanks, Jesse, and thanks, Jared Bednar.
Thanks, Jesse.
Those
and
are 2
Jared
shout-outs.
Bednar. No, it's true. And if you have more you want to add to Jalen Hurts, we can also transition to Schneekloth, the head coach of the Colorado Eagles, and his comments about video coach Kim Weiss. To add a little bit of context, we'll also give you a little more background before her interview. She is only one of 3 women to work in the AHL in a coaching role, and the other 2 women who have come before her are actually in the NHL today. So she's the only woman working as a coach in the AHL currently. And Coach Aaron Schneekloth had some comments about the value that she has added to this team since joining their staff ahead of this season. Weiss is a new addition to the coaching staff this year. What does she bring to the table, and how does she round out what you guys are doing together in her role as video coach?
Well, I would say her role is more expanded than video coach. There's no question about that. But her knowledge and passion for the game are extremely high. So she's more than qualified to be around this team and at this level. And her ability and motivation to be the best at what she does separates herself. Like, she's earned every bit to be on this staff, and she's a great addition.
It sounds like she wears many hats. Can you tell me a little bit more about what other things she does?
Yeah, I mean, so she's basically the liaison for everything, right? Like, she's heavily involved in the video side and the coaching, and giving her insight on what she sees on pre-scouts and adjustments that teams are making. And then when you step outside of that, she wears some team services hats as well, or she's our point of contact for travel, hotels, buses. She works with the support staff here on meals and itineraries, and then the players always go to her for help in whatever they need. So she's just an outstanding addition.
I love the last bit at the end about players coming to her, because I do think even the players can recognize that she has a kind of different perspective, and it's something that's followed her in her career. She grew up playing hockey in Maryland herself and actually played college hockey at Trinity College, and she later went on to coach the men's hockey team at Trinity College, kind of her introduction to coaching, and brought them to a national championship there. And that's sort of where her work with video began, and players would be coming to her who previously didn't really believe in video work or really see the value of it. But with her addition to the coaching staff, they started to see it, and they were coming to her personally for those one-on-one sessions to work on their game. And after the Trinity College coaching role, she moved to the North American Hockey League with the Maryland Black Bears. And their head coach actually got sick for a week in March in 2023, and she became the first female head coach to record a win in North American junior hockey when she stepped in for 3 games. They won all 3. And with her as part of the coaching staff, she helped to lead them to an All-East Division championship and improved both special teams, including, but especially, their power play, which saw a huge boost. And one of the things she noted about that coaching opportunity was that the players treated me like they would treat any other coach. And Kim Weiss, she was brought into the Colorado Avalanche fold through the NHL Coaches Association Female Coaches Program. And she was guesting as a coach through development camps and training camps over the last several seasons. And I remember as a viewer watching players get her feedback after a drill, and she was pushing them kind of hard in drills. Sometimes they wouldn't catch a pass necessarily because she wasn't holding back in any way. And you could see it was all good between the player and the coach, though there was a positivity, there was a levity to it, and they would stick around after and get some feedback about what to work on specifically. And so you could see the rapport with players in the organization being built even then, but obviously it left such a good impression that when the video coaching role was open for the Colorado Eagles over this offseason, they had her name in mind because of this guest coaching program, which I think is such a cool path through hockey.
My favorite thing about this interview is that when he's being asked these questions of, what's it like and how is she doing, the way he answers it is like, yeah, of course she's great. Like, we wouldn't have hired her if she wasn't great.
Yes.
And like, it's not some sort of gesture or
Right.
DEI hire. She was hired because it was a beneficial and strategic move to make, and it's worked out for them.
I think of Jessica Campbell, who was one of the other women who have previously coached in the AHL, who's now obviously in the NHL as an assistant with the Seattle Crackle.
I love Crackle!
Seattle Kraken organization. And she was kind of handpicked for that role, and it was based upon word of mouth, which I think when we do the interview with Kim Weiss will become a recurring trend, that so much of how these women have come to their positions has been because of reputation, because through word of mouth, what they have done throughout their coaching career previously has been recognized. It's been uplifted and affirmed by men who've seen the value in it, starting from the players themselves, but also other coaches who see the passion, the dedication, and the knowledge of the game shine through in everything that they do. And that was true of Jessica Campbell when she was working with Coachella. She helped to improve their power play and built great rapport to be then brought on up with the Seattle Kraken with the coaching regime change that happened. And, Jessica Campbell started with coaching the pro men's league overseas, but she was doing individual skills skating sessions with NHL players prior to that. And I think that's where a lot of that word of mouth, positive reputation was built for her. And so it didn't come out of nowhere. And it also didn't just come from the fact that both women, Jessica Campbell and Kim Weiss, played hockey in some degree. And, for Kim Weiss, she broke records at Trinity College. Jessica Campbell, a decorated player herself. But it's also then what they did with that after. And there was such a dedication to coaching and almost an aggressive nature in how they pursued coaching opportunities that put them at the front of conversations to make sure people didn't forget about them, to make sure that that word of mouth carried.
And that's why I wrote down this other example of Haley Wickenheiser, because she's the assistant general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I love her story too, because she was a Olympic gold medalist, and she was considered one of the greatest hockey players in Canadian history. So I love her story of how she got hired, and it was sort of the same thing when, they had asked about the assistant GM job, and, there were a lot of people that they were considering, and as they were considering it, what I read was that they basically were asking, is this a white male? And then if they said yes, then they decided to pass on it. And I think a lot of people were kind of taking that as he's basically passing on somebody who may be the best for the job.
Yeah.
And because he wants to go with someone that is not a white male. But I think in that case, it's just because they knew that Haley was the right person for the job. I don't think they would pass on the best person for the job just to hire a woman. So I think that's a crazy story. And I think, people will look back and hopefully, 10, 20 years and just realize how weird it is that people thought that it was weird to hire women into these positions.
Yeah, when you go line by line with qualifications with a man and a female candidate, it can sometimes seem like you just weigh certain qualifications on the man's side a little more than the woman's. Like if a man played D1 in college and the woman played at what at the time was the highest level of professional women's hockey available, which at one point was through college, and you weigh what the man then did at the D1 level a little bit more, it feels like you're starting to split hairs, because at that point you've got two really qualified candidates and you want to look then at cultural fit,
Mhm.
and just, is there a difference of perspective here? Which candidate has a charisma that seems complementary to what you're looking for in that role? And those kinds of things can be a little hard to measure in a side-by-side paper resume of qualifications, and you kind of just have to get a feel in speaking with somebody. And that's where I feel like women in the conversation can sometimes have their qualifications just weighted less inherently.
Mhm.
And it really stinks, but it also has been held back by barriers that are out of their control that have existed within the women's game, and just the natural bias that people apply to the women's game and what that means and how it translates to the men's hockey.
Mhm.
And so for women, what I like is when they can just separate from the male candidate by being different in a way that's positive.
Mhm.
Like, I look at Emily Engelnatsky, who's the video coach now for the Washington Capitals, having a great season that has surpassed expectation in a lot of people's eyes. And she has a lot of videos online available, kind of breaking down what she does when she reviews video. And it's really educational. And it's clear that this is a hockey mind that is not so different from the other men who are doing this. But I think when you look at like personality, you're just going to bring something a little bit different into the fold when you look for a little bit different.
I think people sometimes forget how important it is to have different perspectives, and that too, like, that was something I learned in college through marketing. You know, a lot of people assemble teams where they are just so different because it helps the whole picture when you have such different perspectives coming in.
Yeah. I think the Avs as an organization have some important women in front office capacities that maybe don't always get recognition. That could be a really fun topic for another day. They've added to their scouting staff with a woman over the offseason, which I think is incredibly cool. But I think that, you know, outside of Wickenheiser, there are other women being added to front offices like Amanda Kessel, and we're seeing it become less of a unique thing too, to where I think there is a day where it isn't a podcast conversation because it's become so
normal.
normalized.
Yeah.
And I'm excited for that day. But until that day comes, I understand there may be some people who are like, well, why, in the same way that with race, you don't want to see color necessarily. But until you've reached that point where it is normalized, I think it is okay to highlight women in the men's game, because right now it still does stand out as a little bit of an anomaly to some people, and their qualifications are still being called into question anytime that they hold a position in the men's game. So until that day comes, I will continue to hold space for these conversations. I think they continue to be important.
I agree. And to give credit to the male allies that make sure to amplify the voices of the women that they work with.
It is so valued.
Mhm.
I can speak for myself personally. Chloe, I think you can also pinpoint men who have been good to you and have helped to support and uplift you to bring you to this place. It's so important. Well, without further ado, let's hear from the incredible, trailblazing Kim Weiss.
Suzanne. I worked with Suzanne last year, and she is such a phenomenal woman, and everything she does is absolutely incredible. So yes, that is a big shout out to her.
She is the one who orchestrates a lot of contracts, like helps to draft them up and navigate how they fit into the puzzle a little bit. I know they brought in a cap expert as well, but I really associate Suzanne Borchert with the contract side of things and kind of the logistics of how the team comes together on the paper side.
She's great and just so incredibly smart. Everything that she would say, I was dumbfounded, you know?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Love that shout out, Jonathan McMillan. Okay, without further ado, let's get to know Kim Weiss a little bit better and how she found herself in Colorado. It's been such a whirlwind, and I'm so excited for the opportunity. First, have you had to move to Colorado to get ready for this new role?
I have moved here officially. I got offered the job like beginning of August, and I think my feet were on the ground here by August 20th. So it was a pretty quick turnaround from getting the offer to moving in. But I wanted to get here as quickly as I physically could, obviously, to just try to get a jump on the season with rookie camp coming up in a couple of days here.
And did you come over from the East Coast? How are you liking Colorado so far?
I did. I grew up outside Washington, D.C., and I worked last year in Connecticut. So this past summer, I was back in the D.C. area So that's where I got in the car, drove 25 hours with my dog across the country to move here. But I love Colorado. Both my sisters have lived here for one of them over 24 years and one over a dozen years. Um, so I've been out here a bunch and pretty familiar, and I've always wanted to live in Colorado and was just kind of waiting for hockey to bring me. So it's pretty cool that it's finally happened.
Can you walk me through what it's been like, this transition into your first pro role this summer, with your journey into the video coach of the Colorado Eagles next season?
Yeah, I mean, I heard that the opening was going to happen through the small network that is the coaching world. So I reached out to the Eagles and said, like I've been an assistant coach and what some people call a bench coach for most of my coaching career, and I have not done the video side exclusively. A lot of times at the levels that I've been at as an assistant coach, you're doing a lot of the video, but not in the way that this role has to do it. So. I think they were a little surprised that I was interested in kind of shifting my career that route. But it's just such a great lens, I think, to learn, especially like you said, coming into the pro level. I'm going to be exposed to so many more games than I would just coaching, right? Like I have to watch the other team and pre-scout, and obviously I'm watching our game through a different lens that I'm used to. So when the opportunity kind of came open and to have the opportunity to join the organization officially, I was going to take whatever I could get, to be honest.
How have the relationships you've built with the coaches program and the Avs the last couple of seasons brought you to this point?
I mean, it's exactly how I got to this point. I think, I'm sure there was plenty of really qualified candidates and plenty of people that have been in the video coach role longer than I have, because I've been in it for a few weeks now. And I think in any industry, the relationships and the network that you have is huge. And particularly in sports and in coaching, at the end of the day, you're going to war with those people, right? The people whether it's as players in your physical locker room or in your coach's room. And so in general, I've found that, you tend to choose people you trust or the people that you feel like you could trust. And I've been very grateful to get to know Coach Nikolath and Tim Branham, and I've known Dan Heinot actually for quite a few years now. So to already know those guys when you kind of step into the coach's room on day one, obviously our season won't get going for a few more weeks, but we'll be basically the coaching staff this week at rookie camp, right? So those relationships, I think, were huge in me getting this role, and will obviously be critical as kind of the season goes on and the highs and lows of a typical hockey season happen.
I was able to talk last weekend in Theil about his role also with the Eagles this upcoming season, and his enthusiasm was so infectious. Can you just tell me a little bit about how your hockey paths initially crossed?
Yeah, no, Dan for sure has one speed, and it's full go. He's just so full of energy. He's awesome. I met him in 2019, I believe. He was coaching at the National Team Development Program out in Michigan at the time. He was the assistant coach with John Wroblewski on the 2001 birth year, I think, that year. So that's the Jack Hughes, Cole Caulfield. It's pretty legendary birth year at the program. And I went out there just kind of similar program to the one I did with the Avalanche. It was a coaching co-op through USA Hockey. So it was 3-4 days. You just immerse yourself with the staff. And I had done it 6 months prior in an official capacity, actually with the other staff, with the 2000 birth year. And then I called them and said, can I come back? And they were like, the program doesn't actually like allow you to come back, but they're like, but we'll let you, like, if you want to come, we'll open the doors, but so the program funded my first trip, and then I paid actually my way for the second trip there. And that's when I met Dan and the rest of their staff. And obviously, like you said, he's got a pretty infectious personality. And so we got along pretty well right away, and just was grateful that both himself and John Wroblewski kind of stayed in touch with me through my coaching journey. And Dan was actually the one to connect me with Chris McFarland here. And then Chris connected me with Jared Bednar and Ray Bennett and Nolan Pratt. And that's kind of how that relationship all started. So kind of crazy that it was just a happen. I called back and said, hey, can I come back? And then that time I got to meet Dan, and everything kind of snowballed from there. So pretty full circle moment now to be on the same staff 6 years later.
The answer to this next question might kind of touch on what you were just saying, but I also wanted to shout you out and talk about a quote I read in an article about your transition to a coaching role in the North American Hockey League. You said the players treated me like they would treat any other coach. And when I've gotten to watch you at these dev camps and training camps the last couple of seasons, I've seen it in real time, the players leaning on you for insights and you talking with Brian Wilsey. And I just wanted to know how you felt received and validated by the Avs organization, and if there are any special shout outs you'd like to make of people who've helped you along the way.
Oh, I mean, the shout outs could go on for a long time. But no, you hit the nail on the head. Like everybody here has been super welcoming and I mean, I think back to when I met Dan, I was coaching girls U14, U16 hockey, you know, like, I mean, at the time, you know, that was my life and that was the highest level I'd coached at. And I took it really seriously, as I knew my players did. But, you know, like he's molding future NHLers and I'm helping young women, you know, play college hockey and then move on with their lives. Cause at the time there was no women's pro hockey. So little different levels in terms of hockey. And he was so generous with his time. Same with Ray Bennett. Like I met him back when I was coaching girls youth hockey and I would Zoom with Ray and talk about my power play. And, you know, like his power play with Cale Makar and Nathan McKinnon's a little different than my 16-year-old girls that are learning how to shoot a one-timer. So there's just so many of these guys. I mean, like I said, Jared gave me a ton of time. Chris McFarland gave me a ton of time. And that was years ago when there wasn't a clear path that I was going to end up in this organization. It was just a curious hockey coach that, you know, wanted to know more. And those guys were super generous with their time and with honestly being just forthcoming. You know, they would tell me, they didn't know me from anyone else and they would tell me things and kind of share their ideas. And they weren't proprietary of, you know, this is how our breakout is and I don't want other people to know it. So everyone here has been tremendous. And then like you talked about the development staff with Brian Wilsey and now the Eagles staff, getting to know Aaron Schneekloth and Tim Branham 2 summers ago. Everybody's been so awesome and so willing to just give me their time. And like I said, back when I was just a guest coach, that was really, the program was more for me, right? To build relationships and to gain knowledge. And those guys were so giving in that time.
This is just me continuing to shout you out, but hearing you talk about leaning on Ray Bennett for the power play, you worked with both special teams in the North American Hockey League, and they saw an improvement on both special teams, but especially their power play. And so I just wanted to shout you out for the special teams work that you did in the NAL. And before I get too far ahead of myself, can you start with where your love of hockey began and where that love has taken you as both a player and throughout your coaching career?
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite like when I meet players, that's usually what I ask them because I think it's there's a reason this game is so infectious to us. For me, I have a brother that's 2 years older. So I was, I don't know, 1.5, you know, 2 years old and put in front of a net in the basement and he would rip tennis balls at me. And apparently I found that enjoyable. So like I have no memories in my life where hockey wasn't a part. And then when I could, you know, stand and walk and skate, I was asking to be on the ice. But it was 100%. It was kind of started from my brother who he just went to Capitals games with my parents. So my dad's from Connecticut, my mom's from Three Rivers, Quebec. So they both loved hockey individually. And then they got together and they moved to the Washington, D.C. area. And the company they worked for had season tickets to the Capitals games. And nobody else really wanted to go because hockey wasn't overly popular in the early 90s and late 80s in DC. So nor were the Capitals all that good at that time. No offense to them. But so they could get as many tickets as they wanted. They took my brother and then, you know, the rest is history. He wanted to play. And when you have a sibling 2 years younger, you know, I copied him in every sport he played, but hockey was what our family was consumed by and is honestly still consumed by.
I read that you were doing a lot of great video work at Trinity College just last year, turning guys who previously weren't really into video into some of your most frequent visitors. And I wanted to know, can you tell me about navigating the film breakdown side of coaching and what you discovered was really effective in getting through to your players?
I think getting through to players, you have to meet them where they are, and you have to start with what they like, like, I think a lot of coaches, our eyes are inherently critical. That's why we coach. We like systems, we like organization. And so typically when you think of a video session, you think of, well, what went wrong, right? We're going to show a video on what didn't go well. But I think especially when you're trying to build a relationship with a player and to get them on board with embracing those, I call them learning opportunities. You usually start with, like, I don't know if you notice that you do this, but this is how you get open in the ozone and pop off a coverage is really, really elite. And they're like, either they're like, yeah, I know I do that. Or they might be like, I didn't even realize that's how I get open all the time. But I think starting with the things that they're good at usually gets them to come into your door more. And then you can start to sprinkle in see how you didn't do that here. But I think some coaches, again, like I said, your eye is naturally critical. So you focus on that, what a player would view as a negative thing. And then, they're not going to love video very much if it's always, if it's always going to be a clip where they could improve, and it's not shouting out this is exactly what we talked about last week, and here you are executing it.
And what kind of challenges have you encountered, whether in perception, expectations, or even self-doubt as you've climbed through the coaching ranks?
Yeah, I mean, there's some challenges every day. In general, I like to focus on positives in my life. Like I think the perception of what it's like being a female in one of these roles, whether it's where I was in the North American League or college hockey or now in pro hockey, I think the perception is different than the reality. The reality is, most people are good people, and most people, if you treat them like a good human being and you're there to help them, in general, people are going to, meet you with positivity and respect, and they're going to meet you with what you give them. So, I mean, there's times where, of course, there's people that, whether it's fans in some crazy towns in the North American League, shout at you, or, I think there's been times too, probably, where players were a little skeptical at first, and I don't view that as a knock on me as a woman or a coach or where my experience level is. It's, I think everyone has to prove themselves. And just the same way we ask the players to prove themselves to, to perform at the level that they're at, they're challenging us to do the same thing. So there's definitely been moments where I felt friction from, some person or another that I've come across in these roles. But, like you said, there's a little bit of self-doubt at times. Who doesn't have that? But I know the work I've put in to get here, and I know the people, I know how many people have done this ahead of me, male and female, and what they know, and just being able to, I think my network is huge in giving me confidence that I know what they know, I know what they've earned, and they show me respect. So I must belong, and I must have a value here. So, like I said, like, there's times of self-doubt for sure. Like, nobody's perfect, but in general, I know that I've put in a ton of work to be here, and I'm just excited to continue to try to, move this organization forward now with Colorado.
And you've consistently broken barriers, being the first woman to take on different positions. How do you feel these first being a trailblazer connect with who you are as a person?
I think to me, like, I'm comfortable in that environment. Like I said, I grew up outside Washington, D.C., so I was the only girl playing hockey in my entire grade school, basically, not, and I was probably the only hockey player in my class, not male or female, so I was used to being the different person in whatever kind of environment I was in. And then eventually I played on a girls team when I was in high school, and found with some other girls like me, and kind of, then I became more normal and not the outsider. But in college, I would go home in the summers and I would train with all men and boys that, that played college hockey or had played some pro, and, now we're glorified beer leaguers, but no offense to those guys. But yeah, so like, this is my normal, so I think people talk about being a trailblazer or breaking the glass ceiling. To me, it's just another day at the rink. And so I don't really get kind of caught up in it or consumed by it. I understand that there's some momentum to it and some power to it, and responsibility. And I don't take that lightly. But this is my comfort zone, to be honest with you.
The journey through coaching is often about balancing external pressures, absorbing feedback, and listening to your own voice. How do you navigate that balance between proving yourself and staying true to your own coaching philosophy?
I think you go back to the question you asked about why you fell in love with hockey. I think when you're coming from a place that's pure, everything else kind of goes away. I know why I do what I do, and ultimately it's because I love the game and I love helping players. And if whenever, are there external pressures? Are there, especially now going to be in pro hockey, is it going to feel different at times? For sure. But I think when you go back to that foundation of, I get to do what I love every single day. And I get to help, they're not as young anymore. I used to say young people, in hockey and in life. But our guys, up in Loveland are going to need the same support, whether it's on the ice or off the ice, that all the players I faced before have needed at some point. And so I think that foundation helps me stay kind of grounded and helps me stay present in the day to day. And not try to get kind of caught up in, where I am or what's going on or what other pressures there are.
I'm going to ask you just a couple more questions to wind it down, including looking ahead at the season with the Eagles. But I wanted to know what advice you would give to a young woman interested in coaching based upon your own experiences and maybe things you wish you knew sooner in the journey.
I think don't be afraid to ask. As I talked about, how did I get here? I asked to go back to the national. That's, that one phone call back to them to ask for something from somebody that's in a position that you want to be in. The worst that you're going to get is a no, or you're going to get no response, and you'll survive that and you'll move forward, but you never know what doors could open if you just take a little bit of courage to ask a coach for extra time, or to reach out to a coach and say, hey, can I pick your brain? Or how I got the North American League job was, I did skills for free for that team. I talked to the head coach and I talked at a rink one day. He saw me work with players on the ice in the summer. And he said, would you be interested in coming and running skill sessions for us? Like, they didn't have any money. It didn't matter. I wanted to coach. I wanted to expose myself to a new level and a new challenge. And then the rest is kind of history. So I think being willing to ask questions and being willing to say yes to things that are, might not be in your comfort zone, are probably going to lead you to a place that you want to get to. And if not, at least it's going to help you grow and be better where you are. So I feel like I've had that attitude a bit, but I definitely wish I did it a little bit sooner. I kind of stayed in my own bubble and just really focused on my team and my program and my athletes, and didn't, you learn so much more from getting outside of, your area and your program, just hearing different coaches talk, whether you learn new ideas from them or you build confidence that you know what you're doing.
And what are you most looking forward to with the Eagles this upcoming season?
Oh, so many things. First of all, the fan base. I'm so excited. I haven't been to a game yet at the Blue, but I've heard
Cowbells.
Yeah, I'll be in my little war room underneath, but I'm sure I'm going to hear and feel the building shaking.
Oh, yes.
I think it's so cool to be a part of an organization where the fans are that passionate and the expectations are that high. And so that's definitely something that when, the opportunity came about, that was like super high on the list. And I've been up in Loveland area now for a couple weeks, and I've met people walking my dog, and they ask, everybody somewhat knows each other too, which is funny. So they're like, never seen you or your dog before, you must be new. And I'm like, I am. What brought you here? And I just say I work for the Eagles, and they all know what that is. They know the team. And where I'm from, I'd have to go into like 4 layers of detail. So I work for the Colorado Eagles, and that's an AHL team literally 2 miles away from here. That part is so cool. I'm super excited about our staff. I think that the men that I get to work with every day are just tremendous human beings and great coaches. And so I'm really excited to work with them. And then, obviously the players in our team. I think we're all really excited about the signings that we had this summer, and some former Eagles coming back. And also obviously the young players that we've been already bringing up and watching them take their next steps.
That was Colorado Eagles video coach Kim Weiss. As we already know, she wears so many hats beyond just the video coach role. And I want to shout out where the Eagles are at this season with new additions to the coaching staff to include Kim, but also assistant coach Dan Hinote, they have exceeded my expectation on the year. Also now Schneekloth's second year as head coach. They're second in the Pacific Division right now with games in hand ahead of Coachella, who has been a thorn in their side year by year. 25, 12, and 6 on the season with their record. They've had a top 5 in the league penalty kill throughout the season. Their power play is just outside the top 10, which I usually see it struggle just a little bit outside that margin every year, but to see it within that striking distance is great to see for their special teams. And then it's a team that has been among top in the league for allowing some of the fewest scoring chances against, and also a top 4 or 5 team in their goals per game, in finding the goal scoring. And so a lot of that credit to the organization for constructing their team, recognizing the needs. I know they wanted to go out and get some goal scorers, so they've added Tynan and Phillips. They brought Meghan and McDonald back into the fold. But there's also some coaching to credit to some of that success too. And they've had to navigate the same challenges as the Avs in terms of injury because their players get called up and have to go help the Avs throughout the year. You know, Ivan, a player that they probably expected we would be helping the Eagles more this season, has been up with the Avs for a lot of that. And their goaltending rotation has been a little bit of a nightmare, but every goalie that has had to step up has played extremely well for them. So I'm excited with the direction the Eagles organization is heading, and I think they have some really great people at the helm that have helped to bring them there.
I just love how much you can tell how much she loves the game, and she has such a passion for it, and you can see that in everything that she does. So I think that just makes it that much more exciting for the Eagles.
I've been so excited by the development of Kim Weiss being brought into the fold after seeing her at development camps. She just fit right in on the ice, and I love to see the success with the Eagles follow suit.
Yeah.
So without further ado, we're going to introduce a completely different piece of content to you guys. All right, we're going to do a hard, sharp turn into something a little bit different.
It is a hard, sharp turn.
I know, I just have to rip the Band-Aid
Prepare
off of that
yourself
sense.
for
Prepare
how sharp
yourself.
this turn is going to
Right.
take.
Women rule. And without further ado, we're going to be talking about men we don't like. I just want to reinforce how men can be allies.
Oh,
Okay, super chat. Anyways,
vaguely sober.
Vaguely
Awesome
Sober.
interview.
Awesome interview. Thank you.
Aw.
Vaguely, thank you for supporting our content all the time.
All the
Really,
time.
it means so much to see you in the chat when we do our shows, whether it be a post-game show after a really late night here in the Gorilla Sports studio, or when I'm going off on a tangent because I don't know how to introduce our next piece of content. Thank you for being here, Vaguely.
You're our favorite male ally.
You're our favorite. Introducing the Pucks and Prosecco NHL Burn Book. We just have on a weekly basis people that we should send to jail, and we can't do that.
Right
and
to
so
jail.
Instead of being able to send them right to jail, we're going to put them as a page in our burn book. It's cathartic for us, and I think that it can be interactive. If you guys think that anybody deserves to be in our burn book, we're open to submissions as well. And I think to kick off this segment, it only makes sense to put the worst NHL villain I can think of as the inaugural entry, and that is Todd Bertuzzi. Todd Bertuzzi, public enemy number 1. Treacherous vibes, obviously cheap shot, Steve Moore. We all know the story, right? Like, we all know his crimes. It feels like a leg up, like easy one to put as the first entry in the NHL Burn Book.
I hope it hurts seeing his face in the burn book, you know?
It's really, like, his vibes really are treacherous. It feels a little scary seeing him up there, to be honest with you. Matt Cook, you know, that's a really good one to consider for a future episode.
Yes.
For
So
his crimes on Tyson Barrie.
this is essentially of all time, so it doesn't have to be anything recently or from start to the end, but we do eventually want to get it to the point where it's the people in the comments voting on who deserves to go in the burn book and who doesn't.
I love this comment from Leon. Can we put any mid goalie that suddenly turns Vezina contender when playing the Avs? Because the burn book doesn't have to be a serious hockey crime.
Mhm.
It can also just be someone who annoyed us. And
Right.
so they can come out of the burn book,
Mhm.
right? It's sort of even this temporary place to hold somebody until they annoy us a little less.
It's the holding cell within the burn book.
I'm trying to think of this place. It'll come to me.
Okay.
It'll come to me.
But like, for example, we said
The holding
maybe
cell.
Nathan McKinnon is mean to the media one day,
Right.
and then he goes right to jail.
Nate might go in the burn book, for example, but only temporarily. Not all of the crimes are created equally, so we kind of came in a little hot with Todd Bertuzzi because that
Yep.
was like pretty bad.
Mhm.
But they won't all be as serious, and they might come out of the burn book.
Yes.
We might put Jesse in the burn book.
Jesse can definitely make it in the burn book. He has the opportunity to get in the burn book more than anybody else because we're around him so much.
Okay, purgatory was the word I was trying to think of earlier, by the way. Yeah,
Sorry.
Pucks and Prosecco purgatory.
That's great. The PPP.
The PPP.
Wow.
And it's like Hotel California. You might check in, but you might never leave. If you're Todd Bertuzzi, you're there for life. You're never getting out of the burn
Yes.
book.
He's stuck in there. There's absolutely no way that he can ever get out of the burn book.
But I also want to close this out with yes,
We brought the back.
with a pair that I have etched into hockey's burn book.
Yes.
And I can't take sole credit, Chloe. We talked about this one together, and I think one of these
We did.
players probably belong there like sooner. Like if I didn't put him in there, you were gonna put him in there.
Oh, yeah. And what's funny about them being paired together is that it's a good reason why they're paired together, but they both could have separate pages
Yes.
in the burn book also.
Yes.
So that's what's exciting about this.
All right, let's share the criminals together. Mark Stone and Matt Rempe. For right now, they're guilty of being questionable, but like Chloe mentioned, they can both earn separate individual
Mhm.
entries into the burn book. I want to know why we're all trying to hurt Miro Heiskanen. As we know, Matt Rempe hurt him earlier in the season.
Mhm.
Heiskanen continued playing, but then there was the incident with Mark Stone. Look, I get that Hint's stick kind of tripped him up and they collided in a weird way, so I don't know that it was the most sinister. But Mark Stone, you're still questionable with the LTIR business.
He has a history of doing these things, you know?
Yeah.
So it's important that we put him in the burn book because he is guilty of being questionable
Yes.
mostly because of the LTIR instances.
You're on my radar, Mark
Yes.
Stone. Okay, we're getting near that time where you're going to have a back injury and be out for the rest of the season. So I've got my eye on you, and it's not lost on me that Miro Heiskanen had to have knee surgery in New York on February 4th, and he's now out on a month-to-month basis, which makes me sad. Like, Rempe, his job didn't get it done, and so they sent Stone in because this is where I'm going to introduce a little bit of a conspiracy theory, okay? Miro
ready.
Heiskanen was supposed to represent Finland in the Four Nations face-off.
Mhm.
And if you look at the Four Nations, the country that has had the most replacements because of injury is Team Finland.
Yeah.
So Urho Vakanainen and Henri Jokiharju were added as injury replacements for Heiskanen and Hakanpää, and Nicholas Matinpala was added as an injury replacement for Rasmus Ristolainen. And the country right behind them that nearly had the second most need for injury replacement was Team Sweden. And as we know, Gabriel Landeskog also should have been in the mix, and Gustav Forsling was ill, but he was questionable. But Team Sweden still second in terms of teams that might have needed replacement. And so I'm beginning to think the fix was in with the league, that they have something against pretty blondes. Pretty blondes. I think that the NHL hates pretty blondes, and they've had it out for Finland and Sweden from the jump. And I just want the pretty blondes to know that when you have haters, people cast evil eye in your direction, and you need to up your protection. You need to cleanse your energy in space, because when you're a pretty girl, people will send evil eye to you and they will hate on you.
True. Gosh, the pretty blondes make sense. And here we go. Let's tie it all back to Mikko.
Yes, I wanted to add the Mikko of it all.
Right?
Have we all just dogpiled on Mikko? Because following the trade, everyone's comparing stat lines side by side.
Mhm.
Like this 50-goal, 100-point player was only good because of Nathan McKinnon, and
Right.
he wasn't good in his own right. And I think we're just too quick to hate on a pretty girl.
Mhm. I completely agree, and I think the league thinks that too. Maybe they were trying to mess with him before the Four Nations tournament.
Because
Who
he was
knows?
questionable. Mikko almost didn't play for
Mhm.
Team Finland as
Mhm.
well. And honestly, I hope our Arturi Lekkonen's okay. You know what I mean?
Honestly, you
Watch your
just
back.
watch your back. But like he's just so lovable that even though he's a pretty blonde, I mean, nobody would touch him. You know what I mean?
I think you're right. I think that there is a type of pretty that reaches this level that kind of unlocks everybody. You know, like everybody's just
He's
kind to you.
untouchable.
Animals and children adore
Yes,
you. The Snow
yes.
White effect, if you will.
Yes, he sings to birds.
He sings to birds.
Arturi Lekkonen.
Arturi Lekkonen definitely does not have the Snow White effect. He's a different Disney princess.
Mhm.
Like, what's her name from Brave? If you could
Is it
change
not
your fate,
Meredith?
would ya?
Someone would you?
Yeah.
Would ya? I
I-
wasn't expecting that accent to come out.
I wanted to shine a light on the jealousy and the mean girl vibes in the NHL this season,
Yes.
targeting Finns and Swedes.
Mhm.
And when Gabriel Landeskog does make his return, all of you are on watch, okay?
Mhm.
I'm looking at all of you closely. I know what you are. You're jealous.
You're jealous. Including Mark Stone and Matt Rempe. Both of them are jealous.
Especially Mark Stone. Old. Back hurts.
Old.
Matt Rempe can't skate, according to Chloe.
He can't skate. No, but the way he skates, it's like he's never even worn shoes before. You know what I mean? Like, it's not even skates. It's like just shoes.
And both are brunettes. I just, like, this isn't a blonde on brunette crime on our end. You know, like, we're just brunettes
Just
observing.
brunettes.
But we've seen it before in the girl world. Okay, I know what you are, Mark Stone and Matt Rempe.
Mhm. You're bullies.
You're bullies.
You're mean girls.
You're jealous.
Tie it back to the Burn Book.
Yep, you're mean girls, and somebody needs to hold you accountable.
I could totally see Lecky singing to the birds in the Finnish fort. That's what I'm
There
saying.
was that story from his childhood when he'd get really frustrated after a loss, and he would like run into the forest to be alone.
Are you being serious?
Yes. And maybe he needed to go
Somebody-
like
Jesse,
connect
do the
with
dun-dun.
nature, sing to the animals.
Lecky's out there singing in the forest to all these
Lucky
birds.
is out there singing in the forest. I'm trying to draw a connect all of the wood on the team and the fact that Landeskog in Swedish means forest. And it kind of reconciles Lekkonen's place on this team, even without the Finnish godfather that is Mikko Rantanen to hold them all together.
And Landeskog just looks like he chops wood.
He looks like he chops wood.
What's that called? Now I'm forgetting. Lumberjack. Landeskog is a stereotypical lumberjack.
He really is. And it's sad that he won't be in this tournament. On a real note, it just doesn't feel best on best at the end of the day. One, guys were dropping like flies. That already made me a little skeptical. I'm glad Sidney Crosby is playing, but it still feels a little weird not having a Draisaitl there. None of the Russian players. It's just like, I don't know what we're doing. And the NHL targeted pretty blondes. So we're just in this space where I don't think this is best on best anymore.
And that is essentially one of the reasons why I'm rooting for Canada, even though I'm not Canadian.
I'm cool with Canada. I kind of want to see Team Finland, who's been obviously hurt the worst by all of this. I want to see them get like an underdog moment and overcome some of these odds. So I don't know if it results in a gold in the end, but I want to see them push further in this tournament than anybody expected because I believe in them.
I believe in them too. I do, to be a little serious, I am excited to watch Lecky and Mikko play on the same line. I think that will be exciting to see them play together again.
I hope it's good for them too, and I hope Mikko Rantanen is okay. Just in general.
Me too.
I know things haven't gone the way he probably would have hoped following the trade. I also think it's the kind of thing that we'll see improvement. It just feels like, the luck stats that we talk about all the time on here. This is a player that's often shooting at a much higher percentage than we've seen following the trade. And so I think that's going to break through for Mikko any day now. Oops.
I hope so. I really hope so.
Wow. That has been your introduction to our hockey burn book. We'll be adding more entries on a weekly basis. So if somebody annoys you this week, let us know who we should put in the burn book next week.
Yeah, everybody needs to vote on who they think should be added to it. And then we will decide if they actually make the list.
And our standards are pretty low, so we'll put them in probably.
Very low.
I'm just kidding. All right, that has done it for me on the second episode of Pucks and Prosecco. Is there anything else you want to say, Chloe?
No, that's it.
Thank you guys so much for joining us today. We'll be back next week with episode number 3.
Woo!